Starting. Hey
Live.
folks, I'm Gene Delasala with Audioholics, and we are doing a live Google Hangouts. We have a guest, Joe from JoeNTell. How you doing, my friend?
Hey, how's it going? What's up, Gene?
Nice to meet you, my friend Joe. In fact, guys, I just want to let you know we're kind of getting into this now, doing these kind of live broadcasts. I'm going to have guests on our channel every now and then. I found a couple of really good home theater focused YouTube channels with sensible people like ourselves, like Joe over here at Joe and Tell. I think we have another one, Youth Man is another one I'd probably be doing some interviews with. And then Spare Change, we have Shane. He does videos for Audioholics as well. So we like to find collectively good, responsible, sane home theater enthusiasts to kind of get you guys the real information on what matters in home theater, none of the snake oil nonsense. But Joe, I think your mission, I don't want to speak for you, but you also want to get more of the youth kind of people into audio as well. Am I correct?
Yes, correct. So yeah, on my channel, I focus more on budget audio because I feel like that's the main issue, right? So I just came back from Axpona, and most of the rooms there were really, over most people's budget. And so the question is always like, how do we get younger people into it? Well, maybe not having stereos that are 10,000 and up. You know what I mean? So that's kind of the stuff that I focus on my channel, more affordable gear.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's important because the affordable gear, and you can't scoff at it because it's getting better. You got companies like Pioneer was the first with the Andrew Jones speakers. I think they kind of broke the mold on good performance budget speakers. But now you got Monoprice, you got Dayton Audio, you've got so many guys that are involved that are giving you respectively good performance for pennies on the dollar that you couldn't get a decade ago. And this kind of stuff, I love this stuff, not because it undercuts anybody, but because it gets people that don't normally spend this kind of money into music and into home theater. And it almost is like an entry point or a gateway from that going on to the more expensive and higher performance stuff. So once they get a good taste of good audio, they're always going to want to upgrade it over time.
Oh yeah, I mean that's the thing I always say is like, if you go into a hi-fi store right now and you ask them like, "Hey, what's a starter setup?" I mean, they might start you off. I went to one place, they wanted to start me off on a pair of Kef LS50Ws that are, over 2 Gs. To them that's an entry point. And when's the last time you just randomly went into a place and spent $2,000 without any research? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Even a couple $100, you still do some research on it, right?
Oh,
So I don't
absolutely.
know. I feel like there's a big disconnect between the audio industry and folks that may potentially get into it. There's a huge gap, and they're not seeing eye to eye. And so hopefully we can help bridge that gap.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. I think that's great. That's why I like seeing people taking this kind of low budget gear more seriously because there's some great performance to be had, guys. Money does not always dictate sound quality, especially in audio and especially in cables. That's the one thing that the law of diminishing returns happens very quickly with that.
All right, I'm out of here. Not just kidding. Um, yeah, here's a question that I have is if we compare some of the budget audio gear of today and compare it to maybe some more mid-price speakers from 20 years ago, I wonder how they'd compare. Like if I went on Craigslist and found some older speakers, I'm kind of curious how they'd perform side by side. Might be a good test.
Well, speakers are getting better with time. I think a lot of the research was paved decades ago. Even the guys at the NRC and Harman, they kind of wrote the cookbook on how to make a speaker that measures well, which also sounds well. And if you go back 40 years ago, I'm talking about like in the 70s and 80s when you just had these giant boxes with a 12-inch woofer, mids and tweeters randomly placed all over the cabinet. They didn't know what the hell was going on. They just were putting out a lot of drivers in there, give you a lot of bass and a lot of sound. Luckily, we've evolved past that, and it's kind of hard now to get a really bad speaker from a modern company because the market won't allow it. I mean, there's only a few companies that could really live on their name, and if you get a mom and pop shop coming up with these weird design speakers, the internet's too smart. People know it sounds good. They're going to write about it, and it's just it's going to take care of itself usually.
Well, at least we don't have those foam surrounds that used to disintegrate, right? That's one.
Yeah, the butyl rubber is a big upgrade. Yeah, you could always tell the speakers from the 70s and 80s went to dry rot around the rings. Like I had the old Serwin Vegas, you'd always have to get those refoamed. Luckily, we've moved past that.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to find, I know we're live now, and the guys, you got to bear with me. I know people are asking questions, and I can't find the broadcast to look at the questions.
If you go to the dashboard, does it show up there?
No.
Like if you go to the event and kind of, or even if you go to your page, I'm curious to see what happens.
Yeah, let me do that. It's probably going to be delayed. This is the first time we've done this, guys, so it's a bit of a learning curve. I see. Okay. I see
68 people. Oh, I gotta mute that. Okay. Yeah, I see people in.
Youth Man is there. How are you doing?
Hey, I can pop in here and say stuff too. Hi everyone. Okay. We're gonna have fun tonight, aren't we?
Yeah, we are gonna have fun. It's off the cuff. It's not rehearsed. It's gonna be raw. I'm sure people are gonna complain, but you know what? F the complainers. We'll still go. I know you had some questions you wanted to ask.
I have some questions from my Patreon supporters, and so they get special treatment from me.
Cool.
Let's see here. You see that slick little plug right there?
Yeah, I like that. Like that. We got a Patreon channel as well. It's awesome.
There you go. Let's see here. All right. So we'll jump into this. Let's see. I'm just seeing what everybody's saying. Love seeing Joe with Gene. Yeah. We kind of agree on a lot of things, I think. So, all right. So first question from Andy Lee. And the question, it's still kind of a long question, but I'll read it out. It says, is the best music speaker also the best theater speaker? Like, let's say you and I agree that $80,000 Wilson speakers are the best for music, whether or not you actually think so, just for the sake of argument, are those $80,000 Wilson speakers also the ideal choice for my front two channels in my home theater? Let's also assume our room space is appropriate for the size of these speakers, or if there's a better speaker that specializes in home theater use, what will be more specialized home theater speakers do better than, will the specialized home theater speakers do better than the musically targeted speaker?
Well, that's a mouthful. Let me try to break this down. First of all, if you're spending $80,000 on a pair of speakers, it better be good for everything, not just music, not just home theater, but everything. There should be no deficiencies when you're spending that kind of money. Usually when you have budget speakers, you're going to have limited output or limited bass extension or both. But when you're spending 80 grand on a pair of speakers, there should be unlimited dynamic range. You should have enough bass to actually have active subwoofers in there. So it should work home theater and music of equal measure in that point. But now here's the problem. If you go and you get these esoteric speakers like the Wilsons, for example, they tend to not have a matching center channel. You know, some of these brands are more geared towards 2-channel only. So unless you could use one of those giant monolith kind of speakers as the center channel, which is going to block your screen unless you put it behind a perf screen, then it's not going to be always ideal to use that in a home theater environment. So a lot of people will have a separate 2-channel rig and then a separate home theater rig. Now, my preference is I like to do both as best as I can because I don't want to have separate rooms for 2-channel and home theater. I like to listen to whatever I want. So I tend to say that the budget speakers, the stuff that's not the greatest in terms of output, they're going to be a compromise. They're usually, what you're going to hear compromising in is more in critical listening when you're listening to just 2 speakers on their own, as opposed to having an array of speakers, whether it's 7 speakers in a home theater or now 7.1.4 with Atmos. You tend to have more forgiving ears when you have multiple speakers playing at the same time. So when they say all these speakers are good for home theater, but they're not so great for music, that usually means that there's compromises in the design and they're getting away with it in home theater because you're not as focused just on 1 or 2 speakers, but it's the whole system in general. That's
I would also say, I agree with everything that you've said. And, a lot of these, home theater speakers are meant to be used with a sub, right? So they're not going down. They're not even trying to go down to 20 Hertz a lot of times because they're meant to be used with a sub, right? And so I think that's one aspect of it. Another thing is, if you're gonna buy some $80,000 Wilson speakers, you're probably gonna have to get a $40,000 center channel, which is a matching one, and then what are you gonna do? Like do two more in the rear? You know what I mean?
Well, that's
in the rear. Like how are you gonna match those up?
The old notion of using 5 equal speakers in a home theater setup is really unrealistic. You're not going to be putting giant speakers for your surrounds, especially, here's the problem, when you put floor standing speakers for your side channels or your back channels, they tend to be too close to ear level and too close to a listening seat, and then they become very localized. I remember years ago when I went on the home theater cruise and had all these guys from the music industry doing DVD audios. DVD audios were big back in 2005. These guys didn't get it. They were mixing for 5 full range channels with no subwoofer channel, and they wanted all the speakers to be equidistant. They didn't even want to use time alignment. And I would sit in these demos, and unless if you were sitting in the sweet spot where they did the recording and mixing, it sounded great in that spot. But when you sat in the back left row, you were right next to that tower speaker with that tweeter just blaring at your ear level, and all your attention went to that speaker. So I don't believe in using 5 equal channels anymore in a home theater environment, especially if you have multi-row, multi-seat. I do like having really good LCRs in the front, and then similarly good in walls or on walls on the sides and back channels, bandwidth limited with bass management, getting those tweeters a few feet above ear level and away from you, so you're not being drowned out by speakers. And this is especially important now with Atmos. I see so many people trying to cram, 11 or more speakers in a tiny space, and now you're looking at maybe 2 or 3 feet of distance between a side channel and a height channel, and then everything just kind of blends together, and you can't even perceive directionality at that point anymore.
Right.
So more is not always better.
And here's another thing. I just recently, like, when was it? Yesterday, I checked out some Wilson Sasha. Right, they're pretty big. These are some pretty big speakers, and I was listening to those, and I was playing some of my tracks that I know have a good amount of bass, and they had some pretty decent bass, but nothing like some SVS subs. I'll just straight up, they sounded good, but I wouldn't say that they hit any lower than an SB 2000 or something like that. So, that's another thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in most cases, you're going to get better bass response by having multiple powered subs strategically located in the room, because most cases, having subwoofers directly under your main speakers is not the best location in the room for bass if you're caring about multiple seats and not just the sweet spot or the money seat.
Right. I read that on this site, Audioholics.
Yeah, in fact, you had a question, I think, on bookshelf versus tower speakers you were going to ask, and I have an article. Why don't you ask the question and I'll get the article so people can take a look at it.
Yeah, we can jump around, because I guess the next question was vice versa. Are there speakers you consider more purpose music than for home theater? I think we kind of answered that, right?
Right.
And then the next one is, are bookshelf speakers all right, so I'm just going to read it as is, so if it doesn't make sense, and it's the sentence. Are bookshelf speakers on floor stands pointless? They take up as much vertical space as a full speaker, so might as well use that extra space for audio output rather than a stand? ?
That's a good question. In fact, my brother recently called me, and he's setting up a home theater in his new house. He's like, I've got these RVH bookshelf speakers you gave me. He goes, but if I put them on a bookshelf, it takes the same space as a floor stander. Which one should I use? First of all, do you see my screen with the bookshelf versus tower speaker?
I see it.
Okay, great. There's really a lot to this question that you have to consider. And I forgot I even wrote this article, which when you were asking me, I was like, I wonder if I have an article on it. And sure enough, I wrote one 4 years ago. So I have kind of a little point system here, depending on your listening habits, your room size, your form factor, whether you're using bass management or not. But let's break this down even more simply than that. If we're sticking in the same line of same brand of speakers, let's say, I don't know, let's say it's an SVS, for example. If usually companies have good, better, best series of speakers. So if the choice is between spending, $500 for a pair of floor standing speakers from their good line versus $500 a pair for their bookshelf from the better line, most likely, assuming you're going to use subwoofers, I would go with the bookshelf from the better line because you're probably going to get better drivers and better crossover components. So what you're going to get is potentially more output in the mids and highs, cleaner output, more articulate sound from a speaker like that. All things being equal. The other problem too is if you're doing budget floor standing speakers, then that could be compromising in the bracing of the cabinet. So maybe not, the enclosure is not as inert. So I wouldn't always discount bookshelf speakers on a stand. I do think if you're going to do bookshelf speakers on a stand, you're definitely going to have to use at least one, preferably two subwoofers. I prefer, if I'm going to set up a system with all bookshelf speakers, I like to do two subs. If I know that the bookshelf speakers don't have a ton of output in the 60 to 80 Hertz region, then I'll tend to place those subs closer to those bookshelf speakers in the front so I could cross them over a little bit higher. So instead of crossing over at 80 Hertz, I'll cross those subs over at 100 or 120 Hertz, run them in stereo. If you have a processor that has dual subwoofer outputs, you could configure it as left and right. Now you could get, there really isn't stereo bass below 80 Hertz, but above 80 Hertz, you get what I call bassousness. So yeah, I mean, it's actually been a lot of research on this. And in fact, we're going to be putting an article on this in the coming months. There's benefits to having stereo bass above 80 Hertz. And I see a lot of people on forums getting these little bookshelf speakers that are 86 dB sensitive. And then they're buying these subwoofers that have 120, 130 dB output. Those little bookshelf speakers can't keep up with those subs.
Yeah, I mean, just my test track for that is the Beatles, The End. They have some like drum that goes like from one side to the other. So, you know what I mean?
Yep.
You can hear it there for sure.
Yeah, so I'd say, I like floor standing speakers. Even I like floor standing speakers bass managed, because even if you have a floor standing speaker with multiple 6-inch drivers, it's still not a full range speaker, because that speaker still can't have the same kind of output below 80 Hertz as a really good powered subwoofer. But you're going to get awesome mid bass punch and a great transition between those towers and the subs, 1 or 2 subs or even 4 subs in your system. So depending on your budget and how much output you're expecting to get, it really depends on what you're looking for. So I have, like I said, I have this article here that kind of gives you a tour to help you make that decision. It gives you like a point system based on listening habits, room size, form factor, bass management, and you kind of look at this point spread. And it's a guideline. Nothing is absolute. We don't deal with absolutes. We're not Sith lords. So we try to keep it real. And I would not discount a bookshelf as an option, especially if it's an MTM. I really like MTMs. I think MTMs don't get enough love. A vertically mounted MTM is really a great speaker because you got dual mids now. You got more sensitivity in the mid-range frequencies. I think a lot of companies miss out and they use like a single 5 1/4 inch mid, and you don't get the dynamic range in the mids like you do with the bass drivers. You get multiple bass drivers and then they give you a 5 1/4 inch mid. You don't get enough sensitivity or enough output if you really want good loud home theater and good music.
Well, MTMs get a lot of love on Budget Audiophile. I'm a moderator on there, FYI. On Reddit, we're always talking about those. I mean, I think to add to what you've already said, I think it depends on the size of the floor standing speakers, right? So if your floor standing speakers truly are full range, I'm talking about down to 20 Hertz, very rare, right? Yeah. But if they are, then that might be a reason to go with the floor standing ones if you want to use your system as a 2-channel audio and home theater, so you can switch back and forth, put it on pure direct mode or whatever, and take out all the DSP, and you should be able to hear good 2-channel audio coming from those 2 speakers. But that, again, that's rare. Another thing I would like to say is a lot of these designers, I just talked to Andrew Jones, and one of the talks he was just talking about how he designs the bookshelves first and then he kind of extrapolates out from there, right? So he tries to make the towers sound like the bookshelf speakers. And so to me, that sounds like the bookshelf speaker is optimized, right? It's voiced exactly how he wanted it voiced, and the rest is kind of secondary to that, right?
Yeah, so, I'm sure everybody has their priorities when they design. That's unusual that he said that he starts with the bookshelf, because usually companies start with their flagship model, and then they try to voice everything to sound as good as it can with the flagship as the reference. So it's interesting that he kind of does the reverse. I didn't know that that was his design philosophy.
Yeah. So what else? What else we got here?
The other thing I wanted to tell you, though, is if you are using real full range towers and they really do go down to 20 hertz with meaningful output, because if a tweeter goes down to 20 hertz, by the way, it just doesn't, it does it at the output that only a gnat could hear. But if you're going to blend full range towers with subwoofers, separate powered subs, it's a tricky endeavor, especially if you're trying to manage LFE output to it as well. So you have to do some pretty advanced stuff with bass management, with EQing, because you don't want to have too much overlap on certain frequencies. You could get too much of the lower mid bass combined. It really pays if you're going to do that kind of advanced setup. You need to have a measurement system like REW and the microphone, and you need to pay attention to in-room measurements at the listening position to make sure you get good integration with all of your sources that are playing bass. So you
wouldn't just trust like Odyssey. You'd think you'd have to go with REW and a U-Mic 1, something like that.
Oh no, I would never trust room correction to solve all your bass problems. You know, the red button almost never works right. I mean, Odyssey does a decent job. I've had good success with Odyssey, but you still have to go in and you're going to have to change the bass management settings. Odyssey tends to identify speakers as large when they're really small because of boundary issues. If you have a speaker too close to a wall. Also, they tend to set the crossover points wrong, and sometimes they get the subwoofer delay wrong, because now we're dealing with subs that have a delay from DSP.
Right.
Yeah, so I mean, you still have to go in, and luckily Odyssey has an editor app now, and Anthem has their own editor app, and you can limit the correction and stuff like that. I think those are great tools, but nothing beats really getting in there and trying to do the manual calibration and measuring what's going on in your room. Because if you look at the measurements that Odyssey spits out after it does its calibration, it's BS. It's like an idealized version of what you think you're getting, but it's not a real in-room measurement. The closest thing I've seen to real in-room measurements with auto correction was Anthem's ARC, and I believe and DRAC. Yeah, I haven't played with DRAC, but we have Shane Bolin from Spare Change has used DRAC, and he's had great results with it. So one of these days, I'm going to take a look at it.
I think they have like a 2-channel demo. I don't know if they still do that, but you can download the software and you can use your mic and try it out with 2 speakers and see how you like it.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, DRAC is very flexible. That's one of the best room correction systems out there right now.
So here's kind of leads right into this last question here. Room correction or room treatment? I mean, I think I know what you're going to say on this one.
Well, I mean, first of all, room correction is not going to work very well if you're in a bad room. I think, and it's sad because when these room correction systems first came out, they were selling it as, hey, we can fix your room. Just press the button. You don't need to put any type of acoustic treatments. You don't need to put, you know, any type of advanced stuff in your room. You can place the speakers anywhere because the room correction system will solve all the world problems. And that's just unfortunately not the case. My experience is the room correction systems work better when you give them a decent room to work with. Because if the room is just a mess, if it's just an echo chamber, then you're just going to be getting so much garbled information with all the reflections anyways. But you also don't want to go crazy with room treatments. I've seen, there's extremities on both ends. I see people that will go and put 50 bass traps in their room
that's probably a nice looking room, isn't it?
It's nice looking if you don't have to deal with a woman in your life or someone that really cares about room aesthetics. But it
looks like those crazy places where, if you're a crazy person, they tie you up and then you can just bounce around on the walls.
Yeah, if you're Doc Brown from Back to the Future, then that kind of stuff flies. But here's the thing. In most cases, you don't need to go crazy with room treatments. I would start with a room. I've seen people that overtreat a room and then they put the furniture in and then the room is too dead. You want to do the basics in your room. You want to take care of the first reflection points and use a combination of diffusion and absorption. You also want to pick speakers that have good on and off axis response, because if you have a speaker that has similar off axis to its on axis, then you need less sidewall treatments. And this is not my research. This is from guys that are much smarter than me at Harman that have studied this stuff for decades, and that we benefit from that research. But with bass frequencies, this is why I keep telling you multi-sub is the way to go, because bass traps are big and heavy and inefficient. And in order to do meaningful bass correction at low frequencies, you need these giant absorbers. And you could eliminate all or most of that just by using multi-sub and EQ. And we've got tons of videos and articles on our site. I've got Dr. Floyd Toole has contributed articles. We have Todd Welty from Harman, a bunch of Harman folks, because these guys have spent decades researching it, and their research works. Multi-sub is the way to go, my friends. If you're going to go and spend $2,000 on a single sub, I'd rather you spend $1,500 on a lower model sub, and then a year from now buy that exact sub and add that to your system, because you're going to be so much better off having 2 subs in your system as opposed to 1. And mostly because you're going to have better bass for a wider listening area, not just a single seat.
You're such a bad influence on my wallet, Gene.
Well,
oh man,
manufacturers love us because we're always telling people buy more subs.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people say that too. 2 subs is the way to go to help with some of those nulls, right?
Well, yeah, there's
how about 4 then? Is 4 better?
Well, I mean, 2 is usually good enough. 2 will get you pretty close. In my home theater, because I don't have a rectangular room, so I can't put this in ideal locations. It actually took me 5 subs to get the bass I wanted. I've got plus or minus 5 dB from 12 hertz to 100 hertz across 2 rows of seats and 6.
What? 6 12? Did you say 12?
Yeah, it goes. Yeah. Well, I've got the Status AT gigantic speakers, and I've got a big DD15 plus subs, and it's craziness. But I'm a bassaholic, and I don't suggest that people go out and do that. I would just suggest 2 subs.
I see you. I get you.
So I see there's a bunch of questions here.
Yeah,
there's a lot. I didn't realize that this many people.
Oh yeah.
I'm going to try to go through some of this. Audio is addicting for sure. Youth Man, yep. Monitor Audio Bronze, good word. Kef from 20 years ago is still great and much cheaper. Yeah, that's true, actually. There are companies. I mean, there was good speakers being made 20 years ago, and some of these companies kind of inflated their prices because they got popular. I definitely agree with that. You could get good deals on some of the older stuff that's still good stuff. I would not, speakers don't obsolete like electronics do. I mean, unless you're talking about a speaker from 50 years ago, those giant white van Criterions that Lafayette used to sell in New York, that stuff was atrocious. But a Kef or a Revel or, Infinity, those speakers from 10, 20 years ago, they're still good speakers.
Trying to catch up too, looking at all there are a lot of questions in here.
Yeah, I can't believe this. Thank you.
Yeah.
Advice. Thanks, man. I've owned probably 50 pairs of clips over the years. Most purchased Youth Man deals. Great deals out there. Used market. Man, a lot of people like clips. Yeah, we just did a review of a really incredible clip speaker, and I've never been a huge fan of horns because I've always heard coloration in the horns, but Klipsch has come a long way with their speakers. We did a review of their RP 8000F towers. And man, those things measure amazingly well. You would not know that that's a horn.
Flat, huh? Because I would always imagine that the top would be tilted up, but if you're saying not.
These were serious speakers. I mean, they're linear, and I want to hear them. I know James Larson does most of our loudspeaker reviews, and he's very meticulous on loudspeakers. He's like, Gene, man, I have to tell you, these are my favorite speaker I've ever heard for the money. I was like, damn, I didn't expect that. So
there's some funny comments in here.
Yeah, killed a pair of BMWs he's reviewing that were actually more money. So that speaks volumes. So for 80,000, those speakers better clean my ears as well. Yeah, really. It should cook dinner for you. Okay, someone says you need those $70,000 speaker cables to go with the $80,000 speakers. Youth Man said that. Yeah, man, when we went to the Florida Expo show a couple of months ago, I loved that show we went to. It was great to see a lot of young people involved, but some of the snake oil there was just cringy to the point that I don't know. I think some of the show sponsors kind of got annoyed with me doing these videos where I was making fun of the cable elevators and that you need to cryogenically freeze your cables. I mean, this is the kind of stuff, it's this kind of elitism that ruins our business. That, only the golden ears, only these guys that are 50 or 60 years old that have never had hearing tests, that don't believe in measurements. They think that your ear is better tool than a freaking device that's made to measure things thousands of times more accurately and consistently. But you have to take their word on it because they can hear the chocolatey sound, that the difference that the cables make. Their wives can hear it from the other room. That
Gene,
kind
you
of
just don't know. You just don't know how to measure it.
You don't know
That's
how
what
to
they
measure
say.
it. We use engineering principles to tell you why this cable's better, but you can't use those tools that govern those principles to figure out why it's better. They have their own magic.
Yeah, I don't get it. I mean, I always say like, you know, let's say they do make a difference, right? I've said this before. Let's say they do make a difference. I'm sure that there's ways to make a difference if you do something to the cable. But my question is always, is it better? Like, what is the difference? Like, tell me, is it better or worse? I don't know, right?
Well, the thing is,
So,
a cable should not be a tone control. A cable should be an ideal cable should be a superconductor. It doesn't have any losses at all. So
mhm.
if you want a cable to sound different, you can make a cable sound different. I can tell you
Yeah,
right now how to make a cable sound different. Get two flat conductors, 2 inches in length,
uh,
flat, sandwiched on top of each other. Run it 20 feet from your amplifier to your speaker. Don't put a Zobel network on the other end of the speaker, and use a Class D amplifier to drive that speaker. That thing is going to oscillate, or it's going to have massive frequency peaking because of the inductance. And that's the kind of stuff that these cable companies rely on. That, hey, listen to this. It sounds brighter, or it sounds different. I don't want it to sound different. I want the cable to be transparent. I want to use my own tone controls, if any. Tone
mhm.
controls aren't a bad thing. I mean, what do you think room EQ is? Room EQ is just an
Yeah.
advanced tone control. But you shouldn't use a cable as a tone control.
I'm kind of interested in that the shit Loki, because have you seen that? It's like a little
No.
thing with 4 bands and it looks like well built. It's a tone control. 4 band tone control.
Oh, for a cable?
No. Shit audio, right?
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Yeah, yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
they have like, tone control. I want to check that out. I'm
Do it.
curious to see.
Yeah, do it. A lot of the audio tweaks just kind of put me off, like putting a little brass cone on top of your speaker or something stupid like that. I mean,
Well, I'll, I'll tell you something funny. So when I was at Expona, or actually, let me rewind a little bit. April 1st, I did this thing where I was just saying like, hey, I found like this picture of this jewelry, where they put like jewelry, like bracelets and stuff, you know. And I said
right.
like, hey, the new cable elevator, it does this and this, just having fun with it, right? I thought it was kind of a funny thing. I went to Expona and there was, I swear to you, they were advertising these cables and they really had them on jewelry, you know, jewelry stands. So yeah,
Yeah.
didn't you have a cable or something like that that you were just kind of like joking around with?
Well, when I was at the Florida Expo show, we were in the von Schweikert room, and we were kind of making fun that they had these garden hose style cables, right? And at the time, I didn't even realize von Schweikert, even though it's a different brand, they're the ones that are manufacturing the cable. It's their own business. It's the same business. And I started talking about cable elevators. I go, at least they don't have cable elevators here. And then after the video was done, I stopped. Then I went over and I'm like, holy shit, there's cable elevators all on the side of on the room. I have to go and turn the camera back on. And then I
Uh,
showed these porcelain elevators or wood elevators lifting the cables off the floor. And then one of the reps comes over and tells me that it stops the electrons from misfiring off the cable and hitting the floor. And I'm like,
man.
not even Bugs Bunny physics is that bad. But you can't argue with these people because I actually think some of them believe it. And, I don't want to make fun of them and I don't want to get
Well,
into a brawl with them over it. But
no, that's fun. Look,
yeah,
if it's fun, like whether we disagree, agree, to me it's fun, right? And
yeah,
I had somebody come up to me at Expona and say like, "Hey man, I've seen your videos and I disagree with you when it comes to cables, right?"
yep,
And I said, okay, that's cool. That's fine. And just real easily, I just said, tell me what I would have to do to convince you that it doesn't make a difference, right? Or not a difference that you'd want. What would I have to do to prove that to you? And he's like, well, there's nothing that you can say because I believe in it. I said, well, the conversation is over. Why am I going to waste my time if there's nothing I can say, right? At least for me, there is something you can do. All they have to do is very simple, is do a demo where I can hear a difference and then show me some measurements that show the difference that I'm experiencing, right? And then do that a bunch of times for everybody. I mean, it's to their best. It's in their best interest to prove it, right?
The problem with the demos, that anytime I go to a demo, a high-end demo, when they're trying to demo whether it's cables or even room correction systems, they precondition the listeners before they hear anything. So they're already telling you what you're expecting to hear. I've seen this with Odyssey. Did this when the Odyssey first came out. They're like, you're going to hear everything open up. You're going to hear this. You're going to hear that. I'm like, can you not tell us what we're going to hear and let us hear it for ourselves?
Oh yeah, because then you feel silly if you can't, right? You feel like, oh man, that guy over there can hear it.
I can't believe it. And they'll probably throw in someone randomly in the audience that goes, that works for them. Yeah, what a difference. And then everyone else is going to mimic them, right? Because they don't want to be the oddball out.
Yeah. I don't know. To me, it's fun, right?
It is fun.
It's just fun. Like, I would love to just talk to some of these people. I've invited some of these guys to, one guy, he contacted me and said, hey, I have a bunch of cables. They for sure work. And I said, well, just bring them by and we can do like some A/B testing or however you want to do it. I'll get you on camera. And if you can tell a difference, then cool. I can be convinced, right? But, I think it's up to them to convince me, right?
I can't believe I've been running Audioholics for 20 years and the cable topic from now versus 20 years ago is just as hot as it's always been. And it's sad because it's the one component in the system that makes the least difference, that offers the most controversy and offers the most, I guess, spirited discussion, as opposed to talking about stuff that really matters. Like, so many people for years wouldn't buy into the multi-sub stuff. At least that's becoming popular now. Or they wouldn't do anything for their room acoustics. How many home theater systems have you seen in the magazines, like the fancy magazines, where they show these gorgeous systems and the whole floor is tile and the walls are glass and they're 20-foot vaulted ceilings, and you're like, it doesn't matter what equipment you put in that room, it's going to sound like crap regardless.
Yeah. Well, I had a guy ask me yesterday. He was a rep, right? Sales rep for a company. And he said, hey, do you still not believe in cables or what? And I just said, look, if I was in your position as a salesperson, it doesn't matter what I think, right? Honestly, I've done sales my whole life, okay? And I could sell cables without having to make certain claims, right? Like, in my opinion, if somebody asked me like, hey, I'm going to get the system, if they're spending $80,000, I think it'd be pretty easy for me to convince them to buy, $1,000 cables just because you've already spent $80,000. It's kind of like when you buy a car, right? They start adding all this stuff, your stereo. You're like, yeah, 3,000, there's nothing. 3,000 is nothing when you're comparing it to 80,000, right? So it's all relative. And so I don't think I have to make any claims. I could just say, like, look, doesn't this cable look awesome? Yeah, it's $1,000. You want to get it? Yeah, just throw it in. That's my thought. I feel like,
yeah, if you want the jewelry, if you just don't make bullshit claims, don't try to use engineering terms that you don't know what they mean and to try to justify the price. I'm fine with jewelry. I mean, people buy Rolexes. Rolex is not, people that really know watches know that Rolex is not the be all end all in watches, but people like the name, they like the prestige of it. So I wanted to read a couple more of these comments.
Sure.
A lot of them. Someone says, yes, manually dialing REW does a much better job. I agree. I mean, I've messed with room correction, but I get the best results when I do it the old fashioned way. There are some systems that are really advanced out there, commercially available. Harman Sound Field Management and JBL Synthesis. That stuff's really good, but it's not available to the general public unless you get the Synthesis products. Youthman says, what do you do when Odyssey sets your crossovers too high and you want to lower them? You lower them. because Odyssey usually gets that wrong. And yeah, so just always go over the results when you do auto setup, because you're going to have to go and fine tune it. Sometimes I fine tune even the levels. I tend to like to boost the center channel a dB or two, because I want to hear more dialogue. I want it to be more impactful, especially if you're listening at lower volumes. So that's just little tweaks I do at the end. Someone else said they found ARC to be superior to DRAC. I guess that's, personal experience. Someone says go Google acoustic fields. Here's the thing I want to say. As much snake oil there is in cables, there's also snake oil in room acoustic treatments and companies too. So you got to be careful with some of these companies. If you're looking for an acoustic company to help treat your room, you have to kind of interview them before you get too involved. I found a lot of these acoustic companies, like I saw Acoustic Fields video where the guy says never put a subwoofer in the corner of a room. I'm like, are you freaking crazy? Like, what kind of advice is that? I mean, the best kind of placement you could do in a rectangular room is have a cornered sub in every corner and then bass manage and EQ. So that's really bad, outdated advice from an acoustics company, and I think that's unacceptable. So if you're dealing with an acoustic, and I'm not just trying to pick on them, I've seen this from a lot of acoustic companies. If you're an acoustics company and you're telling people to throw bass traps all over the room and only one sub, then I would run, not walk away from that company's advice. Because if they're not embracing the latest in science and they're not using the advantage of multi-sub, because multi-sub in itself is kind of an active acoustic treatment, because it's allowing you to manipulate the rooms of manipulate the bass in your room actively. Now, of course, multi-sub doesn't work when you're doing sound production. If you're going to bring instruments into a room and you want the bass to be good in the room, obviously multi-sub is not the answer. But we're talking about sound reproduction, where the subwoofers are always on, always producing the bass. You could be cutting down a lot on your room acoustic treatments by using multi-sub. So if an acoustics company is telling you otherwise, I wouldn't trust their advice, and that's just my opinion.
Can I say something real quick about the cable thing? I think
One
quick thing is I think with RCAs, especially if you're doing a longer run and you don't have, let's say, balanced, I think it's a decent place to spend. Like, just make sure the cables are decent, because RCAs can have some interference. You can get some noise in the RCAs. I'm not saying go spend a crazy amount of money, but even with car audio, right? You'll know that RCAs you can get some noise in the line.
I'm sorry. If you want unbalanced cables to work and not have interference, and even during long runs, it's not the RCA termination that's as much of the factor, but it's the actual cable construction.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, the best cable construction in that case is coax and RG6. I use Belden RG6 from Blue Jeans Cable. That's the best kind of cabling you can use for audio and for video. If an audio cable is good for video, good for audio as well. I'm talking line level, not speaker level. I'm talking low voltage. And if you have a cable that's good to pass component video 1080p, that cable's going to work at all frequencies down to DC. So I don't like twisted pair for long runs. I think there's a twisted pair is fine for short runs, especially if it's like, to when you're dealing with a turntable or something like that. But if I'm routing a bunch of RCAs or I'm routing a bunch of unbalanced cables in a rack, I want something that's got a double foil, double braided shield. And that's the Belden 1694A. And that's not just Blue Jeans. I mean, I like Blue Jeans because they're no BS, but you don't have to buy Blue Jeans. You could go and buy Belden directly. And then I like, for RCAs, I like the Canary connectors because they don't rip your connector off your receiver when you're taking it off. The Monster Turbine does.
So these were sent to me. Who are these? NV speaker cables. So these guys are out of Australia, and no BS, right? No BS on their stuff. My question is this: are they always like this stiff? Because this is kind of hard to route around stuff.
Well,
like the stuff that you're recommending,
or is that an RCA? What is that? I can't see.
RCA. It's an RCA, but it's super stiff.
It's probably the jacket they put around it, and that's a problem. If you can't put stuff like that in a rack.
Right. Anyway,
yeah.
Just curious. And then this is a cable. Hopefully, I don't want to show this one the name, but they gave these out for free at Expona, RCA cable, right? And so this is a cable company. giving out free RCA cable. I plugged it in yesterday, and there's line noise when I use this.
You know why? Because there's no shielding. It's probably, if at best, it's twisted pair. It doesn't even look like a twisted pair. It kind of looked flat to me.
That's not a good advertisement, is it?
No, that's not. That's why I said, I mean, it's not. It doesn't take a lot to make a good cable. The science is so easy in this stuff. I'm sorry to say, I did telecom. I worked in the telecom industry for 7 years. I did high-speed internet design, DSL modems, transmitting 7 megabits at the time. I'm talking about the late 90s, down a 20,000-foot line. You have to have very low noise to transmit that signal, and you have to be very careful in your receiving and transmit circuits, but also in matching impedances and your cables. It's very well understood. This is just, it's not a mystery. This is not like going to Mars and colonizing Mars. It's really not. NASA doesn't put this much effort into cables as the audio industry does.
Yeah.
So let's see what else we have here. Room
Yeah.
correction is good if you do it manual, like mini DSP. I'm running shit low key as a final adjustment. Yeah, mini DSP is great. I use that to manage my multi-sub. Mini DSP is a cool thing because most of the processors on the market only have a single subwoofer output. And if they have 2 subwoofer outputs, they tend to just be a parallel out. In those cases, when you want to have the ability to time align your subs, because that does matter. If the subs are not equidistantly located to the listening area, you're going to have to change the delays to get them to all phase align. So having mini DSP, you could actually have 1 subwoofer input and get 4 independent outputs to adjust delay. You could adjust EQ, and you could adjust level. And then you could globally EQ all 4 of them together once you have them all playing well. So it just takes a little bit of learning. You have to, again, have an interface with a PC, and you have to be able to measure REW. REW is free. And then the UMM6 mic from Dayton Audio is like $80. And in fact, we have a video coming out on how to do REW with the UMM6 mic. I did one a while ago, I think.
I have one with a UMic 1. Just a quick overview on how to kind of use REW, how to do measurements. But yeah.
It's a great program, and it really helps. So what's your favorite Floyd album to listen to your equipment? I think my favorite Pink Floyd album is either Wish You Were Here or Animals. But I also like, I don't know, not Division Bell, the one with Comfortably Numb. I forgot the name of that album. It's kind of eluding me right now. But yeah, I think Animals is probably my best. I don't have any multi-channel Floyd though. I have to get, even though I'm kind of sick of Dark Side of the Moon, I probably should get that in multi-channel because I did hear a demo of it and it was pretty awesome.
I'm gonna have to run soon, Gene. But
yeah, I think we're pretty much wrapped up here.
But it's not complete without me saying that your mic, I'm kind of having a hard time hearing you.
Oh no! Can you hear me now?
I had to. I was gonna do it earlier, but I'm like, you're pretty jacked up, and I don't want to mess with you in case I see you at a show.
People always knock our audio quality and the video quality of this channel. I'm not a video guy. My production quality is pretty ghetto. I know that, but I'll
help you out.
Yeah, you're gonna help me out. You and Shane from Spare Change, he does incredible videos. Man, you guys are really talented. I just wish I had the time to learn this stuff. So bear with me that it's not the greatest, but hopefully the message that I give you guys is useful. And Joe, it was awesome having you here. We're gonna have to do more videos. We'll have to come up with some topics to kind of to do in the near future. And maybe we could get a 3-way call going. Maybe we could get Youthman involved because he's pretty jacked.
Yeah. Get Youthman in here. Get Chana Techno Dad in here. We can have a fun discussion.
Yeah, I wonder if we could do more than 2 people on this. That would be kind of cool to do. It'd be like Charlie's Angels of audio, But
well, if the audience likes what this is about, then maybe we can do it again. I'm always ready.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, guys, once again, this is JoeNTell. Check out his YouTube channel, YouTube.com. Is it just JoeNTell?
Yeah, /Joe, the letter N, tell, JoeNTell.
JoeNTell. And then, guys, make sure you also visit his Patreon page. Visit our Patreon page. It gives you unique access to us to ask questions, to help. You could suggest what kind of videos you want us to do in the future. and you get all the perks. I put content there sooner sometimes than I do on the Audioholics website. And my friends, until next time, keep listening.